For millions of years, the oceans were filled with monsters that shouldn't have existed. One had a neck longer than a giraffe, another had jaws like huge scissors. When scientists found their fossils, they thought nature had made a mistake, but these creatures were real, and somehow they worked. In this video, we'll look at 9 of the weirdest, and the last one on our list, you really have to see to believe. First up, let's go back 380 million years. This right here is Dunkleosteus, and at first glance, you might think it looks like a regular fish, but its head was wrapped in thick bony plates, armor 5 centimeters thick. Your skull, less than 1 centimeter. This thing's head was built like a tank, but the armor wasn't the worst part. Where most fish have teeth, Dunkleosteus had something far more terrifying. 2 pairs of razor-sharp bony blades lining its jaws. Yeah, actual blades. They were part of the jaw itself, and every time it opened and closed its mouth, they sharpened themselves like a pair of enormous scissors. When it spotted prey, it could snap those jaws shut in just 20 milliseconds. That's fast enough to create a vacuum that sucked victims straight into its mouth. And when those blades met, they did not just bite, they sheared. Through bone, through armor, through pretty much anything. Its bite force was crazy strong, and it could basically have crushed anything it wanted to. And it really did like to crush things. Paleontologists have found the smashed remains of other armored fish with bite marks that match perfectly to this thing. Some even show evidence of cannibalism. Yeah, Dunkleosteus was eating its own kind when the food supplies got low. But as terrifying as this was, at least it kind of makes sense. Some of these creatures, not so much. Like this guy, who lived around 242 million years ago in the warm coastal shallows of the Triassic. Tanystropheus was 6 meters long. It had the body of a crocodile, with 4 stubby legs and a neck that made up half of its entire length. Yeah, that's 3 meters of neck, or 10 feet long. The neck was so absurd that when scientists first found the fossils in 1852, they refused to believe it. They thought the neck bones were wing bones from a pterosaur. It took 70 million years for more complete skeletons before they finally accepted the truth. The trouble is, Tanystropheus couldn't curl its neck up or down very easily. It could only swing side to side. So how did it survive? Well, it was an ambush hunter. It would hide its body underwater, floating just below the surface with only the tip of its snout breaking the waterline. Then it would wait. When fish came close, Tanystropheus would whip that neck sideways and snap its jaw shut. The reach was incredible. Prey never saw it coming. But that neck also came with a cost. In 2023, scientists found a fossil of Tanystropheus' skeleton snapped cleanly in half mid-neck. That's actually insane to think about. Something had probably bitten it from behind. Basically, the neck that made this thing such an effective predator also made it the perfect target. I mean, you'd have to be a pretty bad predator to miss a neck that big, wouldn't you? So Tanystropheus was kinda too big for its own good. But you don't always need to be massive to be deadly. Say hello to Nothosaurus. It lived around 245 million years ago and was 4 meters long, with webbed feet and a slender snout packed with needle-thin teeth. They locked together like the bars of a cage. Once something got caught, it was not getting out. Here's the thing though, Nothosaurus was kinda stuck between 2 worlds. It had flippers with claws. It could swim, but it also dragged itself on land like a seal, its belly scraping across the sand. It hunted just below the surface. When a fish swam close, Nothosaurus would dart forward and snap its jaws shut. Then it would haul itself back onto the shore to digest. I mean, in the water, graceful. On land, clumsy as hell. It worked for millions of years, but eventually, creatures that went all in on ocean life left it behind. But then we move on to something you don't want to face in a staring contest. Around 160 million years ago, in the Jurassic Ocean, there was a creature built for hunting where light didn't reach. This is Ophthalmosaurus. It was 4 meters long and streamlined like a dolphin. Deadly stuff. But the weirdest thing about it? Those eyes. 23 centimeters across, the size of dinner plates. I mean, look at those things. If humans had the same eye to body ratio, they would be like grapefruits bulging out of our skulls. But they were there and big for a reason. They were built for the dark and held in place by thick rings of bone to handle the pressure. Ophthalmosaurus could dive over 500 meters down, deeper than a nuclear submarine. Down there, everything is shadows. It would cruise through the black water, scanning for movement. When it spotted prey, it would snap forward and clamp its jaws shut. And it obviously worked pretty well. Paleontologists have found fossils with fish scales still in their stomachs. But not every predator in the Jurassic relied on perfect vision. Some didn't need to hunt at all. 165 million years ago, in the warm, shallow seas, there was a fish. And not just any fish. This one was the size of a humpback whale. It was called Leedsichthys. God, these names are brutal today. It was 50 feet long, and some weighed up to 45 tons, which makes it the largest bony fish that has ever lived. When Victorian fossil hunters first dug up its remains in the 1880s, God, that's a long time ago, they had no idea what they were looking at. The bones were massive, curved, scattered across the quarry floor. Some thought they belonged to multiple animals, but despite all the bones, it had no teeth. Its mouth was just a huge opening filled with hundreds of bony combs that filtered plankton out of the water. In other words, it fed like a whale. It would cruise through the Jurassic oceans with its mouth wide open, swallowing thousands of gallons of seawater and straining out the tiny shrimp, jellyfish, and fish larvae. But despite its size, it wasn't safe. Giant pliosaurs, marine reptiles with heads the size of a car, shared those same waters. They hunted Leedsichthys. That name's gonna kill me. The way orcas hunt whales. And when it died, something really, really interesting happened. I mean, a 50-foot fish sinking to the ocean floor would create such a feeding frenzy for one thing. Scavengers from miles around would swarm the carcass, gorging themselves for weeks. But then, as the body rotted, it sucked all the oxygen out of the water around it, potentially creating a dead zone where nothing could survive. Yeah, scientists think that Leedsichthys' body was so big, when it died, it was catastrophic. So how do you top that? Well, we're gonna go back, pretty far back. Around 470 million years ago, long before dinosaurs, long before even trees existed. Back then, this guy was lurking on the ocean floor. This is Cameroceras, and here's its close relative, Edestus. They were relatives of squids and octopuses, but they looked nothing like the soft-bodied creatures we know today. They had shells, straight shells, like enormous ivory spears stretching up to 20 feet long. The animal itself lived in the wide end, a cluster of tentacles and a sharp parrot-like beak. The rest of the shell was hollow, split into chambers filled with gas and fluid. The creature could shift its weight by pumping liquid in and out, rising or sinking whenever it wanted. That's a neat little trick. Inside the shell ran a tube, as thick as a man's thigh, and it controlled everything. But how did it hunt? Cameroceras would sink to the seafloor and wait, motionless, its long shells sticking up like a piece of driftwood or a chunk of coral. And then something would swim close, a trilobite, a small fish, maybe even another shelled nullonoid. And then Cameroceras would strike. A sudden jet of water, tentacles lashing out, that beak snapping shut, cracking through shell and armor like it was nothing. Paleontologists have found fossils of smaller creatures near Cameroceras' remains, possibly prey, possibly gut contents, but we'll never know for sure. But what we do know is that when these giants died, Their shells did not just sink or rot, they became homes. One fossil was found with other creatures living inside its empty shell, like an Airbnb on the ocean floor. But evolution didn't stop at spears and beaks. Sometimes it built something that looked like a mistake and then just turned it into a weapon. About 310 million years ago, in the murky swamps of the Carboniferous period, there was a shark. Well, sort of. This is Edestus. It was 22 feet long, sleek, fast, and absolutely terrifying. But not because of its size, because of its teeth. You see, most sharks have rows of teeth that just replace themselves. One breaks, another slides forward to take its place. Edestus didn't work like that. It had one continuous blade of teeth in each jaw, upper and lower, like two curved saw blades jutting out from its mouth. As the shark grew, new teeth formed at the back of each blade and pushed the old ones forward. The teeth never fell out, they just kept piling up, creating longer and longer serrated edges. The result? Well, you can see here for yourself. When scientists first found these in the 1800s, it took decades to work out how the jaws even fit together, and when they did, they realised this thing didn't bite like a normal shark. Instead, it whipped its head up and down, slashing those curved blades. The upper jaw snapped down while the lower jaw slid backwards, creating a soaring motion that tore through flesh. Paleontologists have found fossilised fish in the same deposits as Edestus, decapitated, definned, sliced clean in half. If you were swimming around in those Carboniferous waters, a flash of those scissor jaws would have been the last thing you would see. But not all predators stayed in the deep. Some patrolled the shallows, where there was nowhere to hide. It might not look like it, but this is an ancient form of crocodile. It's called Dakosaurus, and it lived 150 million years ago. It was 13 feet long, and had flippers instead of legs, with a shark-like tail for speed. Oh, and a head that looked like it belonged to a dinosaur. Most marine crocs back then had long, thin snouts filled with needle teeth, built for snatching small fish out of the water. Dakosaurus was the opposite. Short snout, deep jaws, and teeth like steak knives. Each tooth was 4 inches long, with serrated edges and thick curved blades. When paleontologists first saw the skull, they couldn't believe it. It looked more like a T-Rex than a crocodile. They even nicknamed it Godzilla. And I don't know what fits better, that or the literal translation of its name, bitter lizard. Because Dakosaurus didn't go after small prey, it went after big targets. Plesiosaurs, ichthyosaurs, other marine reptiles, maybe even other prehistoric crocs. It would ambush from below, rocketing up through the water with powerful thrusts of its tail. Then it would clamp down with those serrated teeth and twist, ripping and tearing, soaring through flesh and bone. One fossil skull from Argentina even shows possible bite marks on the snout, maybe from a fight with another Dakosaurus, or from prey that fought back. Either way, Dakosaurus wasn't gonna back down. For millions of years, it ruled the Jurassic seas, a crocodile with a dinosaur's head and a killer whale's instincts. But there's one predator we haven't talked about yet, one that took hunting to the extreme. Between 112 and 66 million years ago, in the western interior seaway, there was Xiphactinus. It grew up to 20 feet long and was built like a torpedo, fast, aggressive, and absolutely fearless. Even sharks would have been scared of this guy. Its jaws were lined with 2 rows of teeth, large fangs at the front, smaller serrated teeth deeper in, and those jaws could open wide enough to swallow prey half of its own size in one gulp. But that's where the problem started, because Xiphactinus couldn't stop eating. Paleontologists have found at least a dozen fossils with prey still inside their stomachs, undigested, sometimes barely chewed. Back in 1952, a paleontologist uncovered a slab of rock. When he brushed away the sediment, he found a 14-foot Xiphactinus, and inside its ribcage, curled up, almost perfectly preserved, was a 6-foot fish. Gillicus, another predatory fish, swallowed whole. And the Gillicus was still alive when it went down. It thrashed, it fought, and in those final moments, it ruptured something inside Xiphactinus. Both fish died together. There's that old saying, don't bite off more than you can chew. Well, the Xiphactinus bit off more than it could actually swallow. Literally. And it's not the only one. Other fossils show the same thing, each one with oversized prey lodged in its guts. It's kinda crazy to think about. A predator so aggressive, so greedy, that it killed itself by overeating. So we've had scissor-toothed sharks, crocodiles with dinosaur heads, fish the size of whales, and more. Some survived for tens of millions of years, and others, they just pushed it too far and paid the price. If you thought these creatures were weird, wait until you see the only islands where evolution glitched. I'm sure you're gonna love this video. Subscribe to Buried Earth and I'll see you there.